Hello everybody and welcome to our webinar this evening on this rather cold and windy evening wherever you are. I hope you're keeping safe. My name is Wendy, and before I hand over to the main presentation by Jane, just a few notices to make sure that you get the most out of your webinar this evening. If you have any questions during the presentation, you'll see a chat box on the right hand side of your screen. There should be a GoToWebinar control panel. Depending on what device, it may be to the right or to the left if you're on a tablet or Android, but there is a question box within there, so if you have any problems at all, just type the question in there. Any technical questions, I'll be watching that question box and help you if I can. Any questions for Jane, she'll be monitoring the question box as well. If you're connected via Wi-Fi, sometimes, especially in this weather, the audio can drop in and out a little bit. If that's the case, there is the option to dial in on the telephone. Again, go back to your GoToWebinar control panel. There's an audio section. If you just click that, you'll see where you can dial in on the telephone. You'll be given a telephone number, an access code and an audio pin. You'll still be able to see the presentation, but you'll just hear Jane through the telephone rather than through your computer. I think that's it on tips on how to get the best out of a webinar. So this evening, Jane is going to talk to us about going deeper into property conversions and title splitting. So over to you, Jane.
Thanks, Wendy. That's a great introduction, and it's got all the nasty technical bits out of the way, which, as anybody who knows Joe and myself, that's not our strong point. We're much better at developing than we are at doing all the technical things, and webinars are a complete nightmare for us in that regard. So, for those of you who don't know us, husband and wife team, been together absolutely donkey's years, and we've been doing property conversions and developing now for close on 20 years. We didn't actually set out to do property conversions. It kind of happened by accident, developing up above a commercial property that we owned. And we only fell into title splitting simply because we needed to get the money out, and a broker friend suggested, hey, why don't we do it this way? This was long before it became kind of the strategy, you know, it was trendy strategy and so on. So it was something we fell into, and we got started getting great results, and so we just carried on doing it. So we operate generally within an hour or so's drive of Bristol, just around the West Country. This is just our preference. There's nothing wrong with you know, developing remotely and so on all over the country. Absolutely, no issues at all with that. It's just our preference. We just like to be near places that we know our patch really well, so that makes it really easy for due diligence and so on. You know, if somebody flags a property up to us, you know, we know instantly what a 1-bed flat, what a 2-bed flat, what a 3-bed house is going to be worth in that area. We know the good streets, we know the bad streets, we know the areas to avoid and so on. And I think there's a lot to be said for getting to know your patch really well. It just makes due diligence a lot easier. And in fact, you know, with the people that we mentor, it's the first thing that we get people to do, you know, get to know your patch inside out. Just makes life a whole lot easier. So we don't just do, property conversions is mainly what we do. But having said that, we do simple refurbs. You know, we do just ordinary single lets. We've got a big portfolio of rentals. We've also done quite a bit of holiday letting in the past, which is quite interesting and something we'd certainly look at again in the future. So property conversions, though, that's and title splits, that's our main strategy. That's what we do most of the time. And here, we don't just do, you know, the standard commercial to resi, because if you restrict yourself too tightly, you know, you can miss an awful lot of other opportunities out there. So, you know, Joe's got a thing, he says, you know, if it don't move, we'll convert it. And that's pretty much accurate. So, you know, we're looking at commercial to resi, yeah, but quite often we'll look at large residential buildings and we'll just convert them into a different configuration as well. So, you know, often it might be resi to resi. Sometimes we'll do commercial to commercial. You know, commercial tenants are absolutely great. We love commercial tenants. So, we're not necessarily into taking things away from commercial into residential, because sometimes commercial tenants can actually be better and the profits can be really just as good. But sometimes the commercial properties that you buy just aren't really right for the area anymore, or they're not right for the market, and so on. And so sometimes configuring them into smaller units or a number of offices or something like that can, be a really practical and profitable thing to do. And of course, we never turn our nose up at a straight, simple title split or a change of use, because I mean that's the great one, isn't it? If somebody has already done the developing, they've already converted the flats, they're there ready, simple, already autonomous units and so on. And hey, you can get your lawyer to do all the work for you. Just simply convert, the titles and so on, and just take the profits out, which is absolutely fantastic. Way to go. So obviously, if those come up, we're really quick to jump on them and take advantage, as I guess we all are. So on today's webinar, last week we looked at very simply what are conversions and what is title splitting. So we've been running courses for about the past year or so now, and we're very aware that literally by the first morning break, there's some people who want to ask much more detailed questions. They want to know, sort of, well, okay, what's the VAT rate for this, and can it be reclaimed, and all this kind of thing, and where does where is VAT 20%, and when's it 5%, and when's it 0%, zero rated, and all this kind of thing. And then there's other folk who come up to us in the morning break and say, oh my goodness, oh, I'm nearly brain, oh, so much information already. And it became very obvious that, we've got a complete diversion of people in the audience. So this year we're going a slightly different angle, and we're chunking up to doing a simpler course and simpler webinars, and then also something a little bit more technical and a little bit more advanced. So last week's webinar looked really simply at what are property conversions and what is title splitting. What does title splitting even mean? So today we're going to just delve a little bit deeper and look at some of the more challenging situations that we find ourselves in out there, and because that's often where the biggest profits can be found. So, we like that in particular. So, in particular, what I wanted to talk about tonight are huge opportunities out there where others simply only see problems. You see, standard, education that we see all over the internet all the time on property conversions, we're seeing all the time, it just tends to be on commercial to residential and the prior approval strategy. And hey, that's great. Fantastic strategy. Really, really profitable. Yeah, I don't deny it. But there's so many people getting involved in that angle, and we know ourselves that when we go to look at a standard commercial to resi, where prior approval, a B1 to C3 office use, where that would be applicable, it's kind of almost getting like HMOs, where a year or 2 years ago there's all this competition, all these other investors there, all busy wanting your project and so on. And of course, as we all know, the more competition there is, all these people, they're clamoring and climbing all over your property, just drives the prices up, doesn't it? Higher and higher. And that's kind of what we need to avoid, isn't it? And so we're quite glad that, again, by accident, we kind of fell into doing things a little bit differently. And so I'm sure those, if you've been following what we do, are very familiar with this, the next project, what I'm going to put on the screen here now. And it's our Barkley Crescent one, right in the centre of Bristol. So it's in Clifton, which is like a really prestigious part of Bristol, really, really prominent building. Now, a couple of doors away, this forms part of a historic crescent, and a couple of doors away, one of them is just a simple townhouse. It doesn't have the lower floors. It's just, just really like the house in the middle, and that's under offer currently for over 1.2 million. But when this one hit the market, and it was very prominent, the for sale signs plastered all over it, anybody driving up through Bristol, I mean, you would see it, no doubt. But consider this, because when it went on the market, it showed all these problems, which of course for us, problems equal opportunities. So the first one was, it was grade 2 star listed. So this meant immediately, forget about any prior approval, permitted development, that ain't going to happen. Grade 2 star, any listed building, you're going for full planning, whatever you decide to do. But this star on the end of the grade 2 just made it altogether more challenging. Because you see, something like 92, 93% of all the listed buildings in the country are grade 2, and that means they've got some historic interest. That little star after it, though, refers to the next 2, 3% after that. And what this means is that there's just a little bit more historic interest. So in this case, it formed part of a historic crescent. So it could be that it had an eminent architect. There's something just that little bit extra special about it. Gives it the grade 2 star. And of course, then the final couple of percent, we're talking the grade 1 listed. And these are the ones of national historic importance, very eminent, prominent buildings and so on. But what these extra stars in the grade 1 means is that rather than ordinarily, you've just got your local planning authority, at the council, which includes the conservation department. Normally at grade 2, that's all that becomes involved. But that little star means that suddenly historic England come into the picture. Now this is the old English heritage, it's changed to historic England now. So they suddenly start to take a very active interest in it. So not only have you got to satisfy the local conservation team, you've got to also satisfy these guys as well. So no prior approval possible. So that's on any listed building. At grade 2 star, you're going to need to start producing architectural audits. Now, again, this isn't something that you've got to do. There's not anything for you to worry about. But what it does mean is it's an extra cost. It means that you have to go and find an architect or a consultant who literally will take a photo of every historic feature in the building, and he will attach that and annotate it to the plan and the description of what these historic features are and where they're to be found and so on. And the upshot of it is it's going to cost you a couple of thousand at least. So that's a bit of a downside. And interestingly enough, usually the local council, they're so understaffed, so stressed and everything, they don't usually have time to even read it. In this building here, we had a fantastic architectural audit done, and we were trying to open up one of the doorways inside. And when I said to the conservation guy there, I said, oh, this was originally a door, you can see from the architectural audit. He said, oh my dear, he said, don't you realise how busy we are? Oh, he said, I haven't got time to read all that. So I thought, great, it cost me the best part of £3,000 and you haven't got time to read it. But hey ho, that's just life at the council, isn't it? So it's far more onerous to get through planning and conservation than a standard grade 2. It's much more challenging in what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. And another thing as well is that they're not bound in any listed building to accept established use. Now, you know that if you've normally you come across something that it's been an individual flat for 10, 20 years, something like that, you can get established use, which means that, hey, it's been there for 10 years, that's as good as planning permission now. As long as you can prove it, it's there and there's nothing much they can do about it. In a listed building, they don't have to honour it. And in a grade 2 star and a grade 1, they'll look very carefully at, do we actually want to honour this? And in fact, on the top floor that you can see there was a standalone 1-bed flat. They wanted return to the room's original proportions and they wouldn't allow it to be honoured. So this grade 2 star, as you can imagine, terrified an awful lot of investors that would ordinarily have been interested. Now, that wasn't the only thing, you see, because this building, although it was grade 2 star, was semi-derelict. Because you see, they don't really have time, these conservation departments, to keep an eye on all the listed buildings in their area. And quite obviously, nobody had been in this building from any authority for many, many years. And you can see at the front, there's even a rusty old gas flue sticking out. I mean, sticking a flue or something like that out the front of a grade 2 star, I mean, it's frowned upon on any great, listed building, but on a grade 2 star or grade 1, sticking something out the front like that is a complete and absolute no-no. Quite a horror story. But the roof was shot to pieces on this one as well. And if you stood on the top floor, looked up, you see daylight through, and rotten floorboards and everything. It was really, really bad. And in front, to get down to the lower floors, there's steps going from the crescent downwards. But these had been blocked in and covered by this horrible corrugated iron. Again, a complete no-no. But it had been done. And another thing with listed buildings is that if you take over a building like this, you could theoretically be held responsible for putting it all correct. So it's really important that the planning authority know the condition that you took it over in and know what your intentions are to put all the issues right. Needless to say, the decor in it was absolutely horrendous. I mean, we're talking shocking pink hallways and all manner of things. And there was even a bath poking out of a bathroom where there wasn't room for the bath in the whole of the room. So they cut a hole in the cupboard and stuck the bath out into the other room and built a cupboard around it. There were things in this building, believe me, we had never even seen before. But of course, all these things were really quite scary to look at. And indeed, when we were doing the viewing, people were shaking their heads and, oh, yeah, people were frightened at this. But that's all good news for us if we're prepared, isn't it? So, there was a whole variety of kitchens and bathrooms on every floor. It was a complete mishmash. Your average mortgage company just look at this and think, I don't think so, and just run away. It would have been a nightmare. And then again, it had this mixed commercial use. Now, on the ground floor, it was an ex-Indian takeaway. The next floor up, it was a closed-down record store. Then above it, the planning authority said it was an ex-guest house. Except from going around looking at it, you could quite clearly see it had been an HMO. Except the council tax records said, oh no, it's a single dwelling with one person living in it. So nobody really knew for sure what the hell was it to start with. What exactly are we contending with here? And then there were site constraints, and I'm going to talk about site constraints quite a bit more a bit later on. But needless to say, because of these site constraints, the average building company coming out to look at this would throw their hands in horror and say, oh, do I really even want to be involved? Do I even want to quote? So all of these were big, big deterrents to the average investor. And so because of all of this, even though it's in a really prime position, we managed to buy it for 600,000 and absolutely fantastic profits, only up against 5 other bidders, and that was absolutely astonishing. I mean, this is like 18 months ago, so we're talking really quite recent, in the height of Bristol's property market absolutely flying. So let's take a look then at some of these costs. So we were able to buy it for 600,000. Now that was 50,000 over the guide price because we knew we were up against 5 other individuals, well, 4 including us. So there was 5 of us in the bidding, in the sealed bid, and we wanted to make sure we got it. But we followed our system for working out the absolute maximum purchase price we could go for, and we knew we could safely go for 600,000. Build costs 385, way more than we'd normally spend. We're normally looking, I mean, we came out at about sort of 38,000 in the end on our Shepton Mallet project per unit, and it's including the services, carpets and everything, but this was way more. But that was because, the roof needed extensive work. There's a lot of remedial work, a lot of refurbishment, not just conversion work going on in that building. And the other costs were quite high as well. This was a no money down deal. It's done with private investors, bridging, and development finance. There's some hefty finance costs in there. And there's some hefty planning costs and other things like that as well. But it results in a net profit of 485,000. So you can see, by looking for problems that other investors run and shy away from, you're discounting yourself from the opportunity to earn big profits for yourself. So, we say, we like problems. Go looking for problems, because often that's where the profits are to be found. So, over these 20 years, a lot of people have said, well, how do you do these? How do you do these projects anyway? Is there any kind of system? And we really, it's like, ultimately, there's 7 vital steps that you need to follow methodically, because it's good to have things in good order in order to make sure that everything is totally covered and diligently dealt with. So all of equal importance, really. So step 1 is the stress-free source strategy, where we cover basically where to find the projects. That's pretty essential, isn't it? Where do we go out? Who do we go and speak to? Where do we find them, and so on. And the second step, this due diligence review, that's where we cover. You can see the majority of projects that you identify, on Rightmove or Property Link or something like that, you can pretty much discount just on the back of a napkin calculation. Not even worth your time going out and doing the viewing, because don't forget, time is money. You don't want to waste your time going out looking at properties that are never going to work anyway. So and then what to look out for on the viewing. We're always looking for an easy conversion, always looking for a good flow of rooms. If it's listed, is it even practical or reasonable what you're proposing? Because if you're going to need to take down loads of structural walls and carve, main rooms up into smaller things, chances of getting that through conservation, become quite remote. And so it just makes it all more challenging. And then step 3, asset sanity formula, is does it actually stack financially here? And here, we look at in some detail the costs, and we always work backwards, always start at the end, look at the GDV first, the gross development value, the end value, worked out on comps, not on other, prices advertised. So what do all your slices of, all your flats, all your slices of cake is the analogy we use. What do they add up to? Take your costs off of that. And incidentally, as in last week, I said we have got a pretty extensive cost spreadsheet that if any of you would like a copy of it, just send an email to us at jj@jjharling.com, and we'll get that sent through to you as a link. So if you want a copy of the cost spreadsheet, it's just literally a list of a lot of the costs that you may come up against when you're costing your project out. Just a check sheet, because the last thing you want to do is forget anything and then be halfway through your build and suddenly think, oh my goodness, I didn't take into account that, and suddenly find that your profit's getting hugely eroded. So work backwards. That will give you a maximum purchase price. That's how we came to know that we could safely go to 600,000 on Barkley Crescent, even though 550 was the actual guide price. Is guided at. So with regards to working out the financials, let's look next at actually funding your project, because here's a lot of people think that you need huge funds, limitless bank account and so on, in order to be able to do these kind of developments, which it's just simply not true. Actually, you don't actually need a great amount at all. So let's look at some of these options here. So first of all, we've got own funds. I mean, that's brilliant, isn't it? If you've got, substantial funds of your own, that's fantastic. And you may be tempted to go out and just simply use your own funds and do your own development. That's great from a cost point of view, obviously, but may not be the best use of those funds. And don't forget, it's always a great idea to keep substantial funds and so on for proof of funds. It just makes the whole proof of funds much less challenging. So if you've got own funds, I would say don't discount the other methods, because that may not be the best use for them. Secondly, private investors. I mean, these are great, aren't they? Can be a whole lot more flexible. I just want to point out here that private investors, it may not be the high interest what's interesting them. It could be that they're needing to learn how you do these conversions. They're needing to gain experience. Maybe it's a swap of skills, like an old bartering thing. Perhaps they can do something for you, and you can do something for them, that type of thing. And that has been quite practical for us in the past. So it's not just necessarily the high interest rate that might attract them here. So, and these private investors, they could do the whole amount of the project cash by raising funds elsewhere, to enable them to have a first charge, which you as the joint venture partner perhaps would sit behind them with a deed of trust. Sometimes people are a whole lot more willing to put more money in if they've got the ultimate security, the first charge. And a project we're showing you in a moment is exactly what we did in that scenario. Or of course, private investors you can use for mezzanine finance. So this is top-up finance on top of your original main loan. Next, bridging. Bridging's kind of the main method that you would use for most of these projects, because certainly like the one we showed you before, Barkley Crescent, there's not going to be many lenders who would be remotely interested in lending on that property in the state it was in. But bridgers, they'll do things like this without an issue at all, and they're often, they're really quick and efficient to work with. And so sometimes that speed can be what gets you the deal as well. Something very much to bear in mind and so on. So if your project hasn't got planning before you actually complete, bridging's got to be the way to go generally. And then once the bridging has gone through, at that point then you can morph it into development finance or commercial finance. So with commercial finance, we've got the standard high street banks. Some of them will look at things like that, but generally they're liking to see planning in place. And there's the challenger banks as well. These are the likes of Shawbrooks and Aldermore and stuff like that. And they'll often look at things which, your high street bank is a little bit too staid and stuffy to look at. We generally tend to go for straightforward development finance here, following on from the bridging. So bridging loan to purchase the property. And once you've got the planning in place, at that point then, it can go into development finance, where you will then be given usually a loan to value based on the land value. And you'll also be given a percentage, and this percentage can often be 100% of the development costs. So you probably get 65 to 70% of the land value and 100%, up to 100% of the development costs. Now these development costs are usually paid in stages. So you may need investor finance to get you to, say, a certain stage one. For instance, we're quite often with the builders we work with, we go for monthly drawdowns. We don't work with huge building companies, and obviously the larger the company, often the greater their their cash facility, and so maybe they don't need the cash quite so often. But generally we're looking at monthly drawdowns. So you need to have enough cash to get you to stage one, and then the development finance company will send a QS, a quantity surveyor, out generally, who will then assess what they've invoiced. Have they done what they've said they've done to a standard that's acceptable? And is it the right percentage of the total value that they're claiming? And if they agree that the invoice is fair and reasonable, They will then do a report to the finance company, who will then release the funds. So you then use those funds to get to your next stage. So development finance, is a great practical way. We use it a great deal. So then we're looking at crowdfunding. Now this is hugely growing in popularity, and it's a bit of a win-win, isn't it? Really, because it's great for investors earning money, and it's great for developers and so on. We're finding crowdfunding very flexible, very quick, and very easy to deal with. And I'm quite sure that crowdfunding is going to be definitely a force to contend with and grow, in future years and so on. Can't see that really declining. And then piggyback experience. Now, this is kind of what I'm talking about when I'm saying that this could be the motivation for an awful lot of private investors. Because consider that, you may have done 1 or 2 developments of something in the past. And so for you to get development finance or commercial finance isn't an issue, because you're able to demonstrate experience. And with crowdfunding as well, you can demonstrate, that you've got experience of this. But it's kind of a chicken and egg, isn't it? Because people say, well, how do I get the experience if I can't get the funding to do it? So by linking with you, piggybacking on your experience, or you piggybacking on their experience, that's a way of being able to do a project, and then to be able to demonstrate afterwards that you have got some experience now. You would diligently, document what you've done, lots of pictures and that kind of stuff. And then you can go to a bank next time and say, hey, this is a project I've been involved in and so on. And for a lot of investors to gain that kind of piggybacking experience could be the motivation why they join you. It may not necessarily be the high interest rates. So, to demonstrate this experience, you would need to show somebody in your team what experience they've got and so on or other, or maybe form an SPV, which is a company, like a special purpose vehicle just for that particular development, and maybe have them as one of the directors in that SPV company. Again, it shows that they're actively involved and that you're not somebody with no experience trying to do it all of your own. And so, like the joint venture, the thing to get very clear is who's bringing what to the party. Who, they bring in the finance, or they, what else are they doing? They bring in the actual deal to the party. What are you all doing, and so on. But joint venturing can definitely be a way of pooling resources. And for us, it certainly meant that we were able to work on more projects at one go than we were, when we worked as sole operators, as we did in the early 2000s generally. And lastly, don't discount assisted sales, because hey, you might not even need to buy the property in the first place. If you've got somebody who owns the property and they don't really know how to develop it and how to maximize that property's potential, then hey, go into a JV with them. You can bring your experience, your knowledge, in order to develop it and maximize the profits out of it, and then just split the profit with them. So kind of another form of a JV. Can be very practical, because hugely cut down on those finance costs, hugely cut down on the holding costs. So not to be sniffed at all, these assisted sales. Very much well worth looking at, I think. Now, last week, we going on to this chunking up and chunking down kind of thing. So we're introducing a brand new course this year, which was the Introduction to Property Conversions and Title Splits. Simply looking at how to find great deals, how to work out if they stack, negotiating the planning maze, builders, building regs, title splitting. What is title splitting? Because a lot of people don't even realize what a straight title split is, and then lots of exits, because I said we've been through 2 credit crunches, we've seen lots of bad times out there and so on, and believe me, you just need to be looking for safety. Don't want to be left holding the baby with your developments and so on. So that's the introduction to property courses. This is aimed at, if you've done like maybe a couple of buy-to-lets or an HMO or something, you fancy getting into developing, but you don't really know, sort of where to start, who to contact, what to do, and all this kind of stuff. So that's a basic introduction course. So Introduction to Property Conversions and Title Splits. There's a new date here, unavoidable circumstances. We have to change it from January to the Friday, the 10th of February. And we've also changed venues as well, because, you know, we've got people who are saying, oh, you never do anything nearer London and so on. And so, yeah, we're going to the Holiday Inn Maidenhead. This is the one where the old Berkshire Property Meet used to run from. Seemed to us to be a pretty good central venue. So that's where we're operating it from. 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock, including all refreshments, lunch and a full workbook, and 397 for, believe me, a very, very full day, but kept at a level where, you know, if you haven't done much, you won't find too challenging. But then the other side of the coin is an advanced property conversions and title split course. This is where we can really start to go down in detail and start looking at the kind of things like, you know, VAT and what rates are applicable, companies, capital allowances. Do you know there are, something like, it's a ridiculous amount, something like 85 or 90% of the commercial properties in this country haven't had their capital allowances claimed. So everybody is paying a whole lot more tax than they need to. Crazy. But you don't know what you don't know. And I have to admit, do you know, we bought and sold an entire holiday let business. We built it up, sold them all, and we didn't claim the capital allowances on any of them. Huge mistake, huge error, but you know something? We hadn't heard of capital allowances claims. Nobody had told us. So we didn't do it. That's really shocking, isn't it? We don't want that to happen to any of you guys. So that's definitely going to include that. And, you know, it's things like CIS, CDM, it's all the kind of things that you need to be aware of and so on. You know, CIS is where you become basically the government's tax collector for them and so on. Not sure I'm altogether see why we should need to do that, but hey ho, you know, needs must and so on. So the advanced course going a lot deeper into the kind of things that you need to know, and also looking much more deeper at these more challenging projects, the kind of things where the big opportunities are, but you need to know the regs and you need to know, you know, what the possibilities and the guidelines, so you don't take on something that basically is never going to work in the first place. So that's the brand new course. It's a 2-day one because we no way we can pack it into one day. Going to go on to 6:30 in the evening because hey, we've got so much to cover, I think. So 1197, that's for the 2 days, lunch both days, refreshments and so on and so forth. But back to the jigsaw. So we've got the perfect planning process here. So don't shy away from the fact that the project may need full planning. You know, if it can't get prior approval, it doesn't mean to say it's a no-no at all. What it does mean is that a lot of investors will not be around, so it's less competition for you. So don't shy away from full planning, change of use applications, listed buildings, because as I said, that's where a lot of great opportunities are to be found. And you just need to know what is possible and what is practical and how to ensure planning success. And one of the things we do on our course is give access to all the power team that we use, because, you know, often we don't actually work with an architect. We work with an architectural technician, like a CAD planner. Considerably cheaper, but also we find really quite flexible. We really like working with a guy like that, and we've been working with this particular chap since the early 2000s, and you know what, touch wood, we haven't had a conversion project fail. And he was only saying the other day that he hasn't actually had any application fail for quite a number of years, which I think is quite an astounding record. So yeah, we share our power team there. And then we go on to the physical build before. It's not just a refurb, these conversions. You know, you're heavily into rules and regulations of what you need to do. Soundproofing, insulation, it's all really important, but sometimes those can be negotiable, particularly in a listed building. But what is never negotiable and always has to be of utmost importance, fire regulations. You know, the fire authorities will be given your building regs application the once over. They will be giving approval. And another thing there is we always work with private building regs and not council building regs. Just simply prefer to work with the same team so we know kind of what they're looking out for, what's acceptable and what isn't. It's just kind of the way we prefer to go, I think. So point on here is we often work with sprinklers. Sprinklers, it's not like the old things, horror things you see on films where, somebody burns the toast and the whole place gets flooded and all your furniture gets ruined. It's not kind of like that. They work on heat rather than smoke and so on. But they can often mitigate some of the demands. So, for instance, if you've got a listed building where your conservation officer doesn't want you to change the proportions of your main rooms, he may not want you to put lobbies in and things like that to give double door fire protection, which is often an essential component of planning permission and building regs for a conversion. Often having sprinklers involved can help to mitigate that. And indeed, on the last two listed projects we've done in Bristol, we've been able to avoid putting in these fire lobbies because we've had full sprinkler systems. And they're not as expensive either as what you might fear. Certainly our College Green project, which was 4 flats and a commercial, that came to about 4,000. And the Barkley Crescent project, you can see there, I think it was around 6,000 or something like that. So not a huge amount. And when you consider what having those rooms intact, the proportions maintained, can add to the end value. So I think actually they're well worth doing. So but let's look at some of these problems that you can encounter now actually on the build, which have those other investors absolutely running for the hills and leaving loads of fantastic opportunities for you. I'm talking here about site constraints. This has been really pertinent for us for the last 2 projects we've done in Bristol. So I just want to consider here some of the things that certainly make a lot of other investors run. So first of all, got to consider all the rubbish, all the stuff that you're taking out, when you're doing your site clearance right at the beginning. Normally you think, okay, just get a skip, put it outside. But what if you've got double yellows outside? What if you're on Bristol Centre? What if you're on a main, thoroughfare or something like that? It may not be possible. Even with a license, it may not be possible. Could be hugely, hugely expensive. Could be hugely time consuming and waiting for licenses to come through. So a lot of people are very wary about that. And okay, so the next thing you may look at is, okay, skips are a complete no-no. I'm going to have to get a removal lorry to come along and take the rubbish away at regular intervals. That's a method we use quite often. But where are you going to store all your rubbish? Because in a grade 2 star listed building, you can't store it out the front in the crescent. I think everybody would be absolutely up in arms about that. And if you've got no garden or something, where are you going to store it? So that's something to consider. So if you've got a commercial unit or something on the ground floor with easy street access, there's often a way around that. And the removal as well, have they got to come down loads of flights of steps? That type of thing. Or can the labourers just simply take the rubbish straight out and load it onto the lorry, and the lorry just drive away with it and take it to the tip or wherever they're taking it. So the other side of the coin there is deliveries, of course, because you need to get the deliveries to site. And so again, if you're on a city centre, double yellows, no pulling up, no parking any time during the day. When are you going to get your deliveries? It may well be that you have to get your deliveries organised at the weekend. And then once your deliveries come, where are you going to store them? With this in mind, quite often we use off-site storage. So lockups, containers, that type of thing. So don't discount actually storing materials off-site until they're actually ready for use. And then there's access in parking, because can the deliverers actually get to site? For instance, if we didn't have the door at the bottom of this project, they would have to take it to the side of the crescent, then carry it all up the steps onto the main crescent height, and then walk around the entire half circle of the crescent to get all the materials in. And I tell you, that would not be very popular. So this side door was a huge boon to this this project, but it's another issue to get over. And how far have they got, to haul it to site, and how many steps have they got How many labourers are going to be needed? Because it all adds to the costs. And then where are your builders going to park? And what's going to be the cost if they've got to park on parking meters? It's another cost to consider, isn't it? Now, a lot of building companies, you'll get them in to quote for a job like this, and they'll see initially, they will see immediately all these issues, and they'll say, "Oh, do we really want this job? Do we really need this job?" And you know, they'll probably decline to quote, or they'll send in something absolutely astronomical, and you'll think, "Oh my goodness, I can't make the project work at that price," and so on. So there's another problem. And if you've got a building team that is willing to work around these issues and so on and work with you, then that's opening up again, isn't it, the opportunities for big profits and so on. So again, we look for properties often with difficulties and think, how best can we solve these difficulties? How can we get around them? Not I can't do this, it's how can I do this? Find the solution to the problem. And that's where the property, you know, the big profits can arise. And this one, incidentally, or you can't see the top story because it's an attic room, which photos taken too close to see. But it's 6 stories, public access on 3 of the sides, and the other side is party wall. So loads of problems there, loads of opportunities though, and a great project with great profit there. But you know, there may be other challenges as well, because this is the other project that we're working on at the moment over in Shepton Mallet. This is another listed commercial to residential conversion. So again, that in itself puts a lot of people off. But here we have no site constraints whatsoever, because at the back of the little cottage which came with the project, there's a huge car park here. So we have plenty of room for skips, plenty of room for all the builders to park their vans and so on, plenty of room to store the deliveries, locked gates and so on. Absolutely fantastic from an access point of view. But this came with a different challenge altogether, and the challenge that this one came up with was the local parish council. I'm not talking the main council, planning authority, but the local parish councillors, because this is situated on a high street, and it was formerly a solicitor's office. And what the particular concern of the local parish council is that they want to maintain the vibrancy of the high street. And they're very, very fearful. They don't want all the shops turned residential. They don't want all the offices to disappear. They want to maintain the high street as being a commercial environment. And so they looked upon our application with some concern, because they thought, well, this is a big solicitor's office and you're going to be taking it away and turning it residential and so on. And so they said, well, how long has it been marketed for? We said, well, 6 months. 6 months it was on the market and nobody wanted it for office use. The only people who were interested were developers like ourselves. Normally that is sufficient for a planning authority to say, okay, hands up, we accept. There's no demand here. We'll grant you the change of use application. Not an issue. But here, the parish councillors dug their heels in, and they said, you know what? We want to be really, really sure. We want to be absolutely sure that there's no demand here. And so we think we'd like you to market it for a full 12 months. So another thing to consider here are terms. Always, always try to get terms on any project you do, because if we hadn't had a long exchange with a delayed completion, we could have ended up paying the holding costs on this development for that extra 6 months while we were waiting for the marketing to go through, and that definitely not have been a good deal, good idea at all. So we had to get then a marketing plan done to attach to the planning application to prove that there was no demand here for it. And this marketing plan needs to be done by a proper person. So the agent who was marketing this property is actually a chartered surveyor, which was absolutely perfect. It was ideal. And so we were able to pay him to do a full marketing report. And this report would show where he'd marketed it for 12 months, at what price he'd marketed it for, what inquiries he'd received, and what use did those inquiries want it for. Because, for instance, if he had had inquiries from people who wanted to buy this building and keep it for office use, that would have blown our application out of the water. But we were pretty confident that it wasn't going to be sold to anybody wanting offices, because nowadays people want a flexible office space. You know, they're not looking for heavy sort of masonry walls where you know, they can't move partitions and so on. You know, it's all into, you know, people kind of work together and share desks and share space nowadays, don't they? And this really didn't fit the criteria of what most people are looking for. But this report then had to go on and say, okay, if you get permission, if we give you permission to change the use, what alternatives are there? Suppose people do want to open an office in the high street. So the report then has to show what alternatives are there and at what price and how long they've been marketed for. So all of this goes in a nice little bound, you know, report. Average cost, oh, you're looking at sort of £750, £850, something like that. So, you know, it's another cost to be built in, and that actually accompanies the planning application. But of course, because we'd done it and it was done properly and diligently, the parish councillors conceded, well, okay, we would have liked very much for this to have stayed as a commercial building, but we accept it ain't going to happen. You know, clearly there is no demand for this building to remain commercial. And so the planning permission went through. I wonder how many other investors looked at this and thought, it's a listed building, won't get prior approval. Yeah, I got to go for change of use, but it's right in a high street where there are lots of, you know, nearly everything else is commercial. And so it's another reason why, again, we didn't come across a huge amount of competition in this as well. So I said we had terms, we had a large exchange and delay completion. And this, incidentally, is the other one that we did with a joint venture partner, where when we went to get the bridging to purchase it, the broker then said, hey, well, you know, if you've got that much equity in your house, to my joint venture partner, why don't you raise the funds, you know, just by an extra remortgage at really low residential rates, and then you could buy the property for cash and you could hold first charge. So, you know, the broker said, you know, Jane, you know, you were going to front it and he was going to be, you know, sat behind you with a deed of trust, but would you have any objection if he, like, the title went in his name and you sit behind him in a deed of trust? And we were like, well, no, absolutely. Why? It makes no difference to us whatsoever. So because of that, our joint venture partner was able to have the absolute, you know, best security ever. He has first charge over the whole property. And then he was able to use his cash for the development finance. So it saved a whole lot of holding costs on this and made this project really, really quite attractive. So it's kind of looking at a joint venture, turning it around from the way most people work, and to be able to offer a joint venture partner a first charge over the property can sometimes be what will sway them into actually wanting to do the deal, because they've got the ultimate security. So yeah, something just as an aside there, not to be sniffed at there. And the project on this, you know, it's in Shepton Mallet. It's a small market town. It's not the centre of Bristol. So we actually paid £295, which again was slightly over the asking price. We wanted to make sure we got the project. These often go to sealed bids, so sometimes you just maybe need to pay over. We're not really about buying below market value, because what our strategy is all about really is adding huge value. And as long as you know what value you can add and work out backwards to what the costs are going to be, and therefore the purchase, the maximum you can offer, you know, then you know what you can go to for the purchase price. Build costs here, 325,000, including all the utilities, because don't forget each of your separate flats. This is 8 flats and a 2-bed attached cottage, all going to need their own gas, water, electric supplies and so on. So that came to 325,000 in total, which we were quite pleased with. All the other costs, we're talking the planning, the finance, the arrangement costs, staging, you know, everything, all the other things altogether came to 230, with a nice profit of 230 lined up for that particular project there. And it was an absolute joy to do, because as I said, there were no site constraints or anything there. So another listed building, another commercial to resi, but because of these issues, yeah, a lot of people will have walked away from it. Just got a couple of questions I've noticed come in here. I've got one there. Have we done deals on purchase lease options as well? Paul has asked. The only thing I'm wary of, I love purchase lease options, don't get me wrong, because really a purchase lease option is just an option, which is the opportunity but not the obligation to purchase. We use options loads, options subject to planning, options as lockout clauses. We just don't very often attach them to a lease as well, because a purchase lease option is really just an option with a rental agreement, you know, included in it. It gives you the opportunity to rent the property during the option period. The only thing for our particular strategy that we're very wary of here is simply that I prefer exchange with a delayed completion if we're putting substantial funds in. It's just more secure. I'm just very wary of a purchase lease option if there's lots of funds. Having said that, we do have one at the moment just about to be agreed and go under, which is just simply a simple little house which just needs a quick little tart-up and refurb. In that kind of scenario, yeah, I think purchase lease options are, you know, a great way of, you know, Joe's got this analogy. He says he's got this big toolbox, and all these strategies sit in the toolbox. So we'll find an opportunity which could be a motivated seller rather than the property. We'll open the toolbox and say, which is the right one for this particular project? And it may well be, as it was in this particular one I was just talking about just then, that a purchase lease option is the way to go. So I would just be very wary of doing a conversion on it though, because you're putting substantial money in, and yeah, substantial money is going in there, and because of that, I would look for something, I think, with a little bit more security. And another question just coming there says, in my experience, the logistics discussed are part of the planning conditions to be discharged pre-commencement. The contractor proposals are contained within the construction phase health and safety plan, the CDM, and the discharges would be led by various statutory departments, so local authority, highways, police. Yeah, absolutely. All this would be covered in the design and access, and quite often a lot of these things are actually conditioned as part of the planning applications. What I'm talking about here is actually whether or not other investors or building companies actually want to get involved in the first place because of seeing, you know, the constraints and the issues, that may arise. But certainly you are going to need to cover these kind of things with building regs and planning and so on. And you wouldn't go ahead and exchange contracts or in any way firmly commit yourself until you are absolutely certain that all of the issues and the problems that you see are surmountable. So perhaps I should say that we do look for problems, but perhaps I should be more accurate and say we look for surmountable problems, which then give great opportunities. It's simply a case of being bothered to look for the solutions. And I've got another question come in from Stella. So just starting out, and I'd like JV with a more experienced developer, and I've only got buy-to-let experience. How would I pitch myself as a good JV partner? I think all these kind of things, you're talking about long-term relationships. You're not going to meet somebody and just jump straight into a JV immediately with them. You want several, phone calls, then meet for a coffee. Make sure all your values are aligned as well. And I would show them your buy-to-let experience, and then just show that you're looking to just expand and just do something a little bit more sort of challenging, a little bit more exciting and so on. So there's going to be lots of people there who, maybe you want to bring somebody who's done conversions into your team. It may not necessarily be a joint venture partner. It could, for instance, be a project manager or a QS or somebody like that, or your architect or a consultant. Just need to have somebody on your team or within your SPV to demonstrate, that you're not alone, you're not trying to tackle this all by yourself. So I think we're almost out of time here now, and so just going back to like the introduction course which we launched last week. So I said, if you've done a couple of buy-to-lets, done an HMO but not done any developing, this is the course that would be just right for you. So finding great deals, working out if they stack in the first place, planning what's possible, what isn't, builders, building regs, what you need to know, title splitting, what the hell that's all about, and how you can earn big profits from it. And then lots of exits, because you don't want to do this fantastic development, create wonderful flats or a lovely little shop and so on, then discover the market's changed and you're stuck with all your money left in, can't get any money out and so on. Just not the way to go. So book online now if you're interested. That's Win-Win Property Buyers, which is our website, /introduction to property-conversions. You'll get a link through sent for this anyway. It was launched last week with a £100 discount, but if you weren't quick enough, it's now a £50 discount as we're getting nearer to the date, and that's the discount code if you'd like to book and get this £50 discount. And that discount will only be available for 1 week too. Wendy, who did the introduction at the first, is our IT expert and feels very strongly that, we're not one of those who say, oh, it's just for 2 days or something, but hell, 3 weeks later you can still have the discount. It's not fair to those that took action quickly. I totally agree with you there, Wendy. So there you go, if you're interested in the intro course. The Advanced Property Conversions course, this is for you if you've done quite a bit of, you've done lots of buy-to-let and HMO and that kind of stuff. You've done refurbs and so on. You're not a complete newbie at the property game. You may have done a really simple conversion, something like, Victorian terrace, 1 flat upstairs, 1 flat downstairs and that kind of stuff. And you're looking to maximize your profits. You're looking to make sure that the tax situation is right, that the capital allowances are right, that you're claiming the correct VAT. You're maximizing that planning and so on, and your chances of your planning success and everything. So, and looking at, as I said, kind of projects that are maybe a little bit more challenging, kind of projects that a lot of investors are running away from. So, if this is what's right for you and you really want to be serious about getting conversions and title splitting going, then the new course then is Advanced Property Conversions. Again, you'll be sent a link through automatically. Standard price £11.97. First time this has been introduced. Discount code 997. Again, open for 5 days on this. So got 5 days now if you like to take advantage of this and get £200 off of this price. There's going to be guest speakers coming in and talking. Don't think I'm going to be standing up there and talking about capital allowances, because something, I'm not the expert on capital allowances. It's like Joe knows how to plumb a bathroom, but a plumber does it better. So, we're calling in some experts to actually help us on this course as well. So it's going to be us and a whole lot of other people as well. So, yeah, we'd love to see you on that. So I think Wendy, are you still with us, Wendy?
Yep, I'm still here, and
Yep.
I've put the links into the chat box for everybody. There's a few links there. There's the link to the introduction course, and I've also entered the discount code. There's the link to the 2-day course with the discount code, and I've also popped the link to our Facebook page. So if you're on Facebook, make sure you go over to our Facebook page and like that, and you'll be kept up to date with everything we're doing.
Can we send through as well the jj@jjharling.com email address? Yep. So if you want a copy of our cost spreadsheet, I said this is just simply a list, not exhaustive by any means, but just something for you to just go and check through next time you're costing a project, just in case you see something on it and you think, I hadn't thought about that. Best to be safe than sorry, isn't it? Know what all your costs are going to be at the outset, and then if you make more profit at the end, that's fantastic, isn't it? That's a bonus. But what you don't want to do is to get 3/4 of the way through your project and think, oh my goodness, I forgot to include that cost. Forget too many of those costs and you can find that's your profit gone. So we don't want that, because this strategy can earn amazing profits. Like we said, 480,000 in Barkley Crescent, over 200 on the Shepton Mallet project, even a simple Victorian terrace, 40, 50, 60,000 easily achievable. So great opportunities here. Step away from the standard commercial to resi and open up a whole lot less competition. And yeah, I would love to be able to share your journey with you. And so, yeah, I think we're 5 minutes over time now. Wendy's going to tell me off for overrunning. He's very unprofessional, which is absolutely correct. So at this point, yeah, wish you all good night, and hopefully we'll see you on some of the courses. Stay in contact whatever you do, and yeah, happy successful investing, and thank you for joining us tonight. Okay, good night.